All right, well, thank you everyone for coming this evening. We're gonna get started here in a moment. Yeah. I don't whistle that loud. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. It's a little warm in here, but we got some air moving around and I think it'll start cooling down a little bit. My name is Joshua. I'm the community programs educator here at Wenatchee River Institute. And for some of you who may not be familiar with Wenatchee River Institute or what we do, our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. So everything that we do here, we try to fit it into the mission in one of those ways. And I think we're doing that here tonight. With me tonight is Jeremy, our tech guy, helping to make sure everyone online can see and hear what's going on. And also these are posted later online, so you can always watch them on our YouTube channel. And we also have Nate and Chelsea over there. You may have bought a drink from them, or you always are welcome to pop up and get a drink during the presentation. So thank you for being here. Wenatchee River Institute, we work towards our mission through both our youth programming and our community education programs. Our youth program, right now, we're delivering hands-on curriculum through our camps. So we have a couple of different camps going on. We have our River Wild Camp, where we get kids on the river to enjoy that time and learn how to be safe and have fun on the river. And so we have those all going on this summer. And then our community programs, we have Red Barn events like this one. And we also have seasonal programs. We have a Naturalists on the River program, where we can take you on the river either in the morning or the evenings to enjoy those peaceful times when not as many tubers are on the river. And we also have one more Red Barn event this summer, August 9th, with Dave and Alyssa Caillou with their book Campfire Stories, Volume 2, Tales from America's National Parks and Trails. So this is a collection of prose and poetry, folklore, and there'll be one of the authors from that book who will be here to tell their story. Another aspect of WRI is our effort to connect the indigenous people to their ancestral lands here. And one way that we do that is through our land acknowledgement. And so I'll take this moment now to read our land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shimpasquatchie people. We're spreading the message they wish to spread to the public. The Wenatchee River Institute sits on the ancestral homelands of the Shimpasquatchie, Pasquosa, or Wenatchee people. The Shimpasquatchie, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchee River and surrounding areas. Their ancestral homeland extends from the Cascade Ridge through what is now known as the Wenatchee and Okanagan valleys. The culture and economy of the Shimpasquatchie people centers on taking care of the land. They fish, hunt, gather roots and berries, basket-making materials and medicines. The Shimpasquatchie are named within the Yakima Treaty of 1855. Language to establish the Wenatchee Reservation was never followed through, even with the needed surveying completed. Many Shimpasquatchie now live on the Colville Reservation, 150 miles northeast of Leavenworth. They were forced off their land here, and the U.S. government moved them to this reservation. The Shimpasquatchie people are still alive today. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they're connected to. Their traditional language is Inhamchin, an interior Salish dialect. And I'd like to welcome you all by saying hello in their language, Tilhusht. Tilhusht. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the indigenous peoples of the place you now call home. The Wenatchee River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. And I'd like just to point out that recently we had a salmon sculpture installed down by the beach, Red Barn Beach. And we had a very nice ceremony to bless it and for it to be something just for us to remember who's been here first and to recognize that. With us tonight, we also have a book for all seasons, Randy in the back there, and you're welcome to buy a book from her, one of Bobbie's books. And we also have Wenatchee Pride here representing. We have Kelsey, who is the VP of Wenatchee Pride. And Kelsey, did you want to come up and say a few things?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, awesome.
How's everybody doing? Good, good. My name is Kelsey Riggs, and I am the Vice President of Wenatchee Pride. I just wanted to say a quick thing about our mission statement, and then we'll get on with our presentation. Our mission as an organization is to empower and connect the North Central Washington queer community and its allies toward creating and maintaining a safe, anti-racist, inclusive, and equitable environment for all. And we would just like to thank the Wenatchee River Institute and A Book for All Seasons for inviting us. And we'd also like to thank Bobbie for writing this book and sharing her story. It's really important, especially today, that we have more of these stories just happening. So hope you guys have a good night. Thank you. Thanks.
All right. One last thing, I mentioned earlier that we're streaming this online. And so I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, we love questions. But if you wouldn't mind holding those questions until the end, and then we can have those people online hearing the same questions, and we can just kind of do the Q&A all at once. So now to introduce our speaker, Bobbie Scopa is a retired firefighter, author, podcast host, and public speaker. She has 45 years of firefighting experience and has received numerous professional awards and industry recognition, including Firefighter of the Year in 1990 from the Professional Firefighters of Arizona, the Governor's Award, State of Arizona, a Certificate of Appreciation from the City of New York for work performed at the World Trade Center in 2001, and the Unit Citation Award for Efficacy in the U.S. Forest Service. She was a featured speaker at the U.S. Forest Service Pride Outside Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion event in June 2021. And she also hosts the host of a podcast, Bobbie on Fire. Bobbie divides her time between Puget Sound, Washington, and Scottsdale, Arizona. So let's go ahead and give a round of applause and welcome Bobbie.
Where was the clicker at? Right there? Okay, thanks. Sorry. Do I, you can put it up?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much. I got to make sure I stay in the lines here. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of Wenatchee River Institute, Wenatchee Pride, Book for All Seasons. This is really great. And for me, it's like, and thank you for coming, because it's coming home for me. You know, I spent 6 years here in Wenatchee and 3 years in Cle Elum. And I always felt like this was home because it reminded me so much of how I grew up in Arizona. So I got to tell you how much. Now, Arizona, northern Arizona, not 118 Arizona. I heard the go. It's like, no, it's not the same. So there are chairs up here if anyone wants to sit down, just so you know. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book and about my life. I'm going to tell you some stories. I'm not going to tell you my personal stories. Those personal stories are in the book. You want to hear them? Read the book. And I don't mean to sound glib about it. It's just that those personal stories choke me up. And so I don't need to be up here bawling in front of you. It's okay. Thanks for the permission. I appreciate that. I'll pass on the bawling, but I'm going to tell you some professional stories. And so let me start by, let me see if that's okay. So I'm gonna show you what I did for a living. And I'm not showing you all this stuff like I am applying for a job. I'm not looking for work. But I wanted to tell you, because if you don't know me, you don't know my experience. And so it's so common where people will say to me, they'll say, what were you doing when you retired? Oh, I was in charge of all fire operations for the Forest Service in Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. Oh, but you didn't really go out to the fires. Well, not so much, but I used to, but you never really fought the fires. And I'm like, you know, I don't want to, this is a PG audience. I don't want to say anything, but the language I would use would not be PG when someone would say that to me. What do you mean I didn't do that? Well, so here's how I started. I started with the Forest Service down in the southwest of Arizona, in the southwestern part in Arizona. I worked for the Forest Service. I was on a hotshot crew. I was on a fire engine. I was an assistant on the engine. I graduated from Arizona State with a degree in natural resources. I went to work for the state fire and natural resource agency in Arizona. And then I went to work as a structure firefighter. So I had a degree in natural resource management. I had been fighting fires and working as a natural resource manager for the state and feds. But then I went to work as a structure firefighter. And there's a really important reason why I did, and you'll read about it in the book. I was trying, I don't mean to be, you know, casual about that, but the point of the story is I went to work for a fire department because I thought that would help me hold the mold together of this male exterior that I was trying to portray. So I went to work for a city fire department. Got a graduate degree. I got to see what I wrote and make sure I don't lie here. I became a fire management officer after my graduate degree. This is after my divorce. So I got divorced, transitioned. Wasn't much of a transition at that point. I put an IE after my name, and that was my transition. I became a fire management officer or division chief in California. Then I wanted to get out of California, and I came up to Cle Elum. I worked for 3 years in Cle Elum. Then I went to the Boise National Forest, and I was chief 2 on the Boise. Then I came to Wenatchee, and I became the forest fire staff or chief 1 on the Wenatchee National Forest. And that was one of the most important jobs I've ever held. Some of you may disagree with me, but I felt like this organization here needed someone to come in from the outside and shake it up. And I did. And so a lot of those people who weren't happy about it aren't here tonight. And eventually I went to the regional office in Portland. And then I did a 8-month stint in the Washington office for the national office. I was the deputy director for fire operations in DC, because in Portland, my job was deputy for operations for the Northwest. So that's a little bit about my professional degree. And I only put it out there so that people will recognize that indeed, I was a firefighter. I did know my business. And it wasn't just like I was an administrator. So, and if you've read the book, you know, you've heard all the stories. There's a lot of stories in the book. Some of them are tragic. Some of them are funny. Some of them are sad and funny at the same time. Disappointing and funny, maybe. But that's a little bit about my career. And I only put it out there for you, those of you who don't know me, to understand that I really was a firefighter, and in my heart, that's a big part of who I am. And in the book, you'll read a lot of fire stories. And the reason the fire stories are in there is because I can't tell my personal story about my life without talking about the fires, because firefighting became integral to my life at 19 when I first went to work for the Forest Service. That was who I became, and it changes you. As a matter of fact, I have my podcast, Bobbie on Fire, and my next story that I want to record, I want to get a couple gals on who have been in fire for 30 years, and I want to get a couple guys, and I want to talk about how being a wildland firefighter, especially, but a firefighter in overall, changes you. Because when I go down to Arizona and I live in this little 55+ community, and I'm hanging out with I call them the little old ladies that are my neighbors. I mean, I have a great time, I enjoy them. And then my retired firefighter friends come down, and I'm like, oh, thank the fucking Lord you're here. Oh my God, I need to be able to speak like a firefighter. My mom would be so mad at me right now. But firefighting changes us. And so that's why there's so many stories in the book about firefighting, because it tells my story. And I'm going to tell you 3 stories here. There's a clock right there. Good. I want to tell you 3 stories, and I want to have them relate to what we're here for. But why are we here? Why did I write my book? I wrote my book because I had a good life. And I owed it to you and everyone else to understand that you can be transgender and be normal. And I say that in quotes because if you guys know me very well, maybe you don't think I'm normal. But the point is that I felt like I owed it to the greater society to write the book. And that's why I talk about the stories now. For 45 years in the fire service, I never mentioned that I was transgender. Now, many people knew that worked with me. It was out there, but I found out after I wrote the book, a lot of people didn't know because I never talked about it. And if they weren't in the circle that knew, they never found out. And so some people knew I was transgender, some people didn't. So I had this podcast. I have a podcast, 1.4 million stories downloaded so far. That's my commercial. I'm very proud of that. 95 stories have been downloaded so far, 1.4 million times. They're entertaining stories about leadership and about fires. And I thought, oh, I should write a book. People told me I should write a book. And so I thought, well, maybe I will. But I thought if I write a book, I can't not tell the whole story, because all of those stories on the podcast, they tend to come just a little bit short of telling the rest of the story. So I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to tell the rest of the story and try to get some good from it. So that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I'm here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I think now we're going to talk about a story. So that's me. I want to talk about my boss, one of my bosses I had. That's me on the right. Just so you know, that was like my first job after I transitioned. So, and that's me, I don't know, when I was probably here on the Oka Win. So I'm gonna give you some insights into what it's like to be transgender on the job, especially this kind of job, a firefighting job. So I had a boss who absolutely loved me. He thought I was the best thing since sliced bread. He recruited me. He supported me. When I needed extra funding for a project and no one could get money, I got money. When I needed extra personnel to get something done, I got extra personnel. The other FMOs, fire management officers or division chiefs, they kind of looked at me like, yeah, she's you know, they didn't like me because I kept getting extra money. I kept getting extra positions, extra responsibility. The boss loved me. I was feeling pretty good. Never talked about being transgender. This was right after, that was a job after that one. Now, there was a meeting we had with all of the leadership, and the topic that day was about LGBT. Well, I don't know if we even had that many letters in it back then, but you know what I'm saying. So the topic was I guess they were calling gay and lesbians, and maybe they called transgender in there too. But that was the point of the meeting, about we got to be, you know, we got to be polite at work. Oh, really? That's outrageous. You know, we have to treat people with respect, all that stuff. Now, so after the meeting, now you could tell this was being talked to us by the HR person. Now, when the meeting was over and we're all standing around getting ready to go to lunch and decide we're going to Arby's or we're going here, we're going there. That's all the fire folks. I could hear an administrator, an agency administrator, talking to my boss saying, Joe, I'm just going to use Joe. Joe, you have to acknowledge you have people that are gay and lesbian folks working in your organization. He says, I hear this behind me. Absolutely not. And she says, no, I'm telling you, you do. Absolutely not. I would know if there were any of those people working for me. If there were any of those people working in my organization, I would know. Now, I'm standing behind them, and I'm not paying attention to Arby's or Burger King, and I'm hearing this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a guy who thinks I'm the best FMO they have. This is the guy who is willing to do everything for me. He loves that I go to church, and I don't go to church for him, but I'm a churchgoer. That's how I was raised. He loves that I can talk scripture with him. I go skiing with him because I know that's a good chance for me to get in and talk with him a little bit. Because the guys all go fishing, him and the other FMOs who are men, they all go fishing together. I'm not invited on those trips. So I'm going to get in on skiing. This man, who I still love and appreciate, was absolutely sure that if any of those people worked for him, he would know. There would have to be like a horn sticking out of our head or something. It would be obvious, you know, you couldn't possibly be gay, lesbian, trans, or whatever, and also work for him. Now, as it occurred, there were lots of lesbian women in the organization. That's pretty commonplace in the fire organization, but he was positive, you know. So my reaction to that, what am I going to do about that? How do I react? I want to be a leader. I was a leader. But how do you think that makes you want to put yourself out there to be a leader, to speak up, and to take the heat when you say something that's not popular? Because that's what leaders do, right? Leaders say the words that aren't popular. So I know where he stands, and that's my boss. So I had to live with that. You know, am I going to sit there and say, you know, Joe, when you say those words, it makes me feel less valued as an employee. If you've listened to AdLearn HR training, that's the voice. Well, you should speak to me with respect, because otherwise I feel unappreciated. No, that's not the way it works. You gotta be, let me tell you how it is. And that was my approach. I was just stubborn, and I was gonna be successful despite what people may or may not think. Now, you might think that, you might wonder if you are if you are trans, I've had interviews where people have said, well, were you ever discriminated against because you were transgender? It's like, well, how would I know? There's so many good reasons to be discriminated against. You can be discriminated against because you're a woman. You can be discriminated against because you're not from the Wenatchee and you became the fire staff on the Wenatchee and you weren't from us. That's a good reason to be discriminated against. You can be discriminated because you're trying to change everything. So was I spoken ill about? Sure. Was I, people complained about me all the time. Who knows why? Who knows why? And it's irrelevant. So that's what it was like at one point with my boss. Now I'm going to go through this little chronology here. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is my coworkers. Now I'm not going to talk about any local coworkers because I don't want to incriminate anyone. But let me talk about, I was an ops chief, operations section chief on a team. Now the ops chief is the person under the incident commander. So the incident commander has got the planning section, they've got the logistics section, they've got the finance section, and then all the firefighters work for the ops chief. And as the planning section chief and the finance section chief told me often, you think it's all about operations. And I would say, yeah, because it is all about operations. We're not here to make pretty maps. We're here to put the fire out, and that makes operations. So anyway, so I'm an ops chief on a team, and my fellow ops chief, there would always be at least two of ops on a team because you had nighttime, you had daytime, you had to be in camp, you had to be out in the field. So it took at least two operations section chiefs to run the fire. Now, my best work buddy I ever had, who's now passed away, he was a big, big man, and he had a big voice. And he had the respect of the entire team. And I was pretty new on the team. So I was junior. There was no arguing who was the senior ops chief. My buddy was the senior ops chief. And I was happy to play second fiddle to him. And, you know, I was full of myself too. I mean, we went back and forth and there's some good stories there about all the times that we went back and forth. I stood my ground. I was kind of a hard ass, but I had to be because you're working with a bunch of knuckle-dragging firefighters. So you had to hold your own. And I say that with affection because I do. I've been a knuckle dragger often. So my buddy, we had just finished a fire in Wyoming, and we came in, we flew in, the locals were getting their asses kicked on this fire. We came in and we put the fire out, and we were feeling pretty good about it. We were now 10 days after showing up, putting the fire out. This is in the sagebrush country in eastern Wyoming, and we're gonna fly out. And we're now flying commercial because the government jet that brought us in can't, they're busy flying other crews around, so they can't take us up. They say, you're gonna fly commercial. Well, you know, in the summertime, as a tourist area, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna be waiting here for a couple of days. So what our operations folks do, this is the firefighter folks, we go to the bar and we start drinking. And we're telling stories. There I was, you know, and that fire's coming up and we're all proud of ourselves and think we're badass, you know. It was a good group. It was a good, competent group. And there was like maybe 10 of us. It was the division supervisors, the ops chiefs, a couple other folks. And we're telling stories. And the stories start to die down a little bit. And someone asks my buddy, the other ops chief, they said, so he had just moved to Portland to the regional office, and he had come from Idaho. And they said, Joe, so what do you think about living in Portland? Oh, Portland. It's a weird place. Why, just the other day, I saw one of them he-she's getting on the train. Now, this is my best friend, my work friend, and he's sitting right next to me. And he says, one of those he-she's just got on the train, and starts talking about the he-she. And I was like, oh, shit. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to say, Mark, when you use that language, it makes me feel less appreciated. I wanted to say, you idiot, you stupid idiot, don't you understand? But there's all these other ops people around, division supervisors around, and we were having this bonding moment. So it wasn't the time to ruin this team building that was going on. Unfortunately, Joe said something really stupid, and I needed to correct him, but it wasn't the time. But that was what it was like. You heard all these things. So, so maybe people at home I might have known that I was transgender. Some folks did and some didn't. When I was on the team, the incident management team on the fires, no one knew. They didn't know. And so because people didn't know, they feel free to say things because he would have never said that kind of disrespectful thing had he known that I was transgender. He would have never said that. It's not possible. He respected me as a firefighter, as a peer. And yet, when the filters were off, he felt free to spew ignorance. I don't know about you guys, but I have spewed ignorance more than once when I didn't mean to. I mean, yeah. That's another presentation of all the times that I've been dumb and I've been a knuckle dragger and I've said dumb things because, you just think you're being funny. You think you're being cute. Oh, you're going to get a laugh out of this. I'll say this. And then after you say it, you go, oh, shit, that probably wasn't good. So that was another time. So that was one of my coworkers. And it's none of those guys there. It's a generic picture. So you can't identify anyone. Now, let me tell you what it's like for me when I was supervising people. So I could tell probably a dozen or two stories about me supervising people and all of that kind of interactions and appropriate or inappropriate kind of language. But let me tell you this story. I'm in Montana on a fire, and I was working as a division supervisor. So I was not the ops chief, I was under the ops chief, and I was supervising a set area, geographic area of the fire. And there were so few firefighters that summer, the team managing the fire couldn't give me crews and engines and all that sort of thing. All they had were dozers and timber harvesting equipment. It's okay, all right, I can make do. I can put line in, I can get some work done until I get crews to do the burning out and holding and all that sort of thing. So they had a whole bunch of locals. Now this is in Western Montana. Now it's Bubbaville, this is not downtown Portland. And I mean that with all due respect. But it was Bubbaville, and so I had no supervision. I had no supervisors working for me. I had like 6 or 7 dozers and skidders and harvesters, but no one to supervise. And so I thought I got to put someone in charge. I can't be directing every single guy there. And so I chose the guy who had the most teeth. And I said, okay, you're going to be in charge of the rest of these guys. He knew them all. He was buddies. He was buddies with all of them. So he said, okay, that's fine. So the local national forest gave me a local gal, a firefighter from the district, And she was going to be my guide. She was going to be my local knowledge to know where the roads were and all that. Well, she knew all these guys too, because she grew up with them. And she was carrying around with her a little CB walkie-talkie. Because the loggers, they had, I mean, they had a radio, but they weren't going to listen to me on the radio. They were talking to each other on their CB. And so this gal is showing me around, okay, this road goes up to that ridge and this goes over there. And it's a big piece of ground. It was like 8-mile long division, you know, and I had nothing but dozer operators. But I scouted it out and I said, okay, I think we can get some line built from here to here. So we're driving around with my local agency person to show me where everything was. And she keeps giggling. She keeps laughing. I'm like, what are you laughing about? Oh, nothing, nothing. And she keeps giggling. I said, what in the fudge is going on? Why are you laughing? Well, they're talking about you. No, she said something like, I said, well, turn up the radio. So she turns up the radio. And I hear those knuckleheads talking about Baywatch. Where's Baywatch? What's Baywatch doing? Where's Baywatch from? Now, you remember that picture, that truck? I didn't know, but that truck apparently looks like a Baywatch truck from that TV show. I didn't know that. I had never watched the show. And so I'm like, who are they talking about? She goes, they're talking about you. I said, well, what's with Baywatch? She goes, your truck. We're in my truck. She goes, this truck looks exactly like the trucks on Baywatch. I was like, oh my God. All right, these idiots, I got to do something. What am I going to do to get their attention? So I'm thinking, all right. So a couple hours go by. They are tasked. I gave them a task to go to a drop point, unload all their equipment, get everything ready to go. When I get back, we're going to start punching line up this ridge. Pretty straightforward. So I show up and they're not done yet. They should have been done, but they're standing around. And I thought, well, this is all right. There's a chance here. So I walk over to Bill. That's the guy who I put in charge of my my brainiacs there. And I said, so I talked to him, what's going on? Well, we're trying to get the work done. And I said, come on, we got to get going. Yeah, okay, all right. So I'm kind of on him a little bit. And, you know, if you are a woman in fire, you don't ever start out with people that don't know you. You don't ever start out like letting them see your real personality. You start out kind of hard ass. You can always pull back. You can't, if you start out all nice and fun, you can't ever get that back. So I was always my way I operated. So when I talked to Bill and said, we got to get these guys going. Let's get the trucks off the low boys. Let's get everybody lined out. We're going to go up the ridge. I had already flagged it out. And now that truck that I had, it had something that I didn't realize. Oh, you can't see it. There's a bumper. It's a custom-made bumper on that truck that made men sexually aroused. It was a custom-made bumper that who's the actor that is Walker, Texas Walker, whatever. Was it? Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris had all his bumpers made at this place that I had a bumper made. I didn't know it was going to be a big deal. So when I walked back from Bill's truck and I walked back towards my truck, all these loggers are under my truck, looking at the bumper. They're fondling the bumper. And I thought, well, here's my chance. I said, excuse my language, haven't you guys ever seen a fucking bumper before? Get going, let's get back to work. And they all, oh my God, and they run off like quail back to their trucks. After that, I mean, like months after that, Bill told me, who I kept in touch with, Bill told me that was the best thing you could have ever done, because those guys thought I was this little piece of fluff, Baywatch from California, and I was a lot thinner then. And And they followed my lead from then on. And we ended up getting some fire crews, and we ended up fighting fire and having some amazing success and fun. If you understand as a firefighter, that fun means active fire and excitement. We had a great next 2 or 3 weeks. Well, there was a time that an agency administrator came out to the line and was upset with something I was doing. Now, he was telling me I was doing some resource management damage. I had a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in natural resources and forestry. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't doing any damage, but there was a person was kind of particular, and we started arguing. And I didn't hold my tongue. I didn't behave professionally. Looking back on it, I am very, very disappointed in my own behavior. But all of a sudden, these 2 Forest Service officials turned around, ran back to their truck and drove off. And I was like, what was that about? And I turn around and here come my loggers with big steel rods and big sticks. They were ready to rumble. And I was like, I was so upset with myself for behaving in a way that was unprofessional. But my knuckleheads were there for me, man. Now, so I got some overhead. I got some strike team leaders and stuff working for me. And they came up to me at one point and said, you know, we don't know what's been going on around here, but these guys would march through hell for you. I said, I don't know. I told them to get back to work one time. And they did. So I have a great assignment. I think it was like back in the old days of 3-week assignments. And fire camp was near the little town where they were all from. And they said, they knew it was my last shift, and I would be leaving the next day, driving back to California. And they said, hey, you got to meet us for a beer tonight. I said, I can't do that. It's not right, not appropriate. I got to stay in camp. No, come on, man. It's the last day. You're going to be here. We want to buy you a beer. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I can fudge the rules, you know. And so I went back to camp and I took a shower and I drove into town. And town was like maybe 5 miles away from camp. And there was one bar in town, the Bar Tavern. Now, is that for a great name? The Bar Tavern, Phillipsburg, Montana. And I go in and they see me, Bobbie, hey, you know, and I go in and they're buying me beers. They had these wooden tokens, and they would buy the token and then they give it to someone and it's good for a beer. I had, you know, the Nomex pants. I had so many, the pockets were completely filled with tokens. I mean, I must have had 100 tokens. You know, what are you going to do with 100 beer tokens? You know, I'm like a 1 beer person. And it was a fun evening. I felt so validated as a firefighter and as a leader. Had nothing to do with being trans. It was nothing to do with anything. You know, when I went to a fire, I was a firefighter. So after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, it's like, I got to get back to camp. I got to get to sleep. I got to drive down towards California tomorrow. So I said, thank you, God. Oh, I know. I was going to sit down at the bar for a second just to kind of catch my breath. I sit down at the bar. You know, they got the big mirror behind the bar, all the bottles lined up. And there's a big sign right there next to the mirror. It says, no queers allowed. And I'm thinking, these guys love me. They love me. They respect me. According to my strike team leaders, they'd march through hell for me. But their idea was, I don't know what their idea was, but whatever idea they had, it was they didn't want any queers in their bar. You know, well, I never considered myself queer, but I knew they would have. I know for sure they would have. So you think about these stories. My best buddy is calling someone who might have been like me, a he, she, my boss who loved me, said there's none of those people working for me, and my crews, these local loggers who would do, they would do anything to support me. They said no queers allowed. So what's the point of all this? As I have said, as I said in the book, let's be kind to each other. And it doesn't make any difference whether you know someone. Maybe you don't know someone is Black. I've done that before. I had Black employees. I didn't know they were Black. And I was talking about diversity. Well, we got to do something to get, some racial diversity. Well, we got the so-and-sos, the family, I'm like, what about them? Well, they're Black. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know. What an idiot I am. Can you imagine what I could have said if I didn't, if I wasn't cognizant of my words? There's so many things that we say on a daily basis that can be so insulting, but you don't know. When I worked at the fire department, and we went on medical calls. And so there's a call that someone is in a relationship where the husband is beating the wife. And we come back to the station. What an idiot. Why doesn't she leave? Why doesn't she press charges? And you go on and on about to talk about that. Well, how do you know that the crew sitting around the kitchen table when we get back to the station doesn't have a sister that's in an abusive relationship? Or the old lady that is a hoarder, and you come back from that call and you're making fun of that woman who hasn't been out of her house for months, and it's a mess inside. And it's so easy to make comments because we don't think we're offending anybody because there's no one there. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I talk about it. And to keep our families together and friends intact. I lost my family through this whole process. It's been 40 some years. And I see one of my daughter, I see my daughter and her family once a year. I get to stay a couple days so I can see my grandkids. I'm trying to avoid that for other families and friends. So that's why I do this. Be kind, be professional. And then, oh yeah, that's me. So I tell stories on BobbieOnFire.com. I'll have a monthly article on Wildland Firefighter magazine. This next one coming out might piss off a few people, I don't know. And I do storytelling and lecturing and that sort of thing. So we got just the right amount of time. I wanna open it up to questions. And can you take questions online? Okay, so I want to open it up if anyone has a question here locally. Yes.
So you told us those 3 stories, and I work for the Forest Service, and so, or any big agency with a lot of overhead. But so how do you decide when you're at work when to confront or to speak up about your secret diversity? Like you told those 3 stories, but you didn't finish the stories about when you do or when you don't, or how do you decide on when to speak up?
So it's totally personal. I never brought it up. I retired. The regional forester for the Region 6 called me. He read my book. He called me to tell me he had never heard, he didn't know, and that it was going to be a big difference in his family because of whatever dynamics they had going on. So I wouldn't say that that's the right answer. It was what I felt like I needed to do. What I was worried about was being a fire leader and distracting my ability to lead by letting everybody and talking about I'm transgender. My number one priority was to be a good leader. And so for me personally, it never It didn't come up. No one ever asked me. If anyone would have asked me, I would have said, yeah, I'll tell you. But no one wanted to know. It's okay, you know.
How old were you when you made the trans?
I transitioned, I was probably 40. Yeah, it was early 1990s. It was early 1990s. I'm 68 now. So, you know, you can, yeah, it's been a while. Yes, ma'am.
How did you know? How did you decide? Which way trans?
It's in the book. I knew from the time I was 3 years old. I mean, I always knew. As soon as I knew who I was, I mean, I can remember which bed I was sleeping in. I knew that long ago. And I just figured I was gonna not transition because, I mean, at first I thought I would transition because I found out you could. But that was back, who knew about that stuff? Like when I was 10, that was 1965. I had read about Christine Jorgensen. So there was no, and then I realized, oh my God, my parents would kill me. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna have to tough it out. I'm just gonna have to be stronger, and by God, because I can do this, you know. And then of course you can only do it for so long until you start unraveling. So.
So now that you've written the book and enough people in the fire business have read it, has anyone ever invited you back to the Forest Service to speak about it?
Yeah, so next week I'm speaking at the Mount Baker Snoqualmie leadership team. I've spoken to the National Fire Leadership Group. So I've been doing some speaking, including with the Forest Service. Fire departments hire me to come talk, and it's about leadership. It just so happens I've got some expertise in the, you know, in my area, but yeah, so they're asking, they're inviting me. Yes, sir.
So I know you don't want to be in tears. You're making me. Thank you, man. As a grandpa, I can't imagine going and see my grandkids.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. And I thank you. And yeah. And let's be kind and let's do it for family.
Yeah.
Of all times.
Right. For all the families, whatever they look like. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
So we're the same age.
Okay.
And we've seen huge shifts in the culture. And I understand your story, and just piggyback on the first question. What are the times that we, as a general public, not in a worse situation, can you give us brief strategies on talking about this when our family members are under?
You know, I have a lot of experience without a lot of wisdom about dealing with unkind family members. So I'm not the one to give you advice how to deal with family members, but I can tell you, I had a neighbor sitting around my backyard. We were all drinking wine, about 4 or 5 ladies, all our age. And someone brought up, all the news about these trans kids who know when they're 6 or 7. Oh my God, these kids, they don't know anything at that age. And I hadn't, you know, no one at that point where I lived knew my history. And I said, well, I knew. He said, you knew what? I said, I didn't know the word trans, but I knew I was a girl when I was 3 or 4. So yeah, kids know. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to deal with it. I've got that kind of behavior and unkindness in my family. I don't know what you do. If anyone has ideas, I'm all ears. But I pretty much, unfortunately, I have written off dealing with a portion of my family. Because for all the years I tried, I was just beating my head against the wall. It was just too painful. So it's like, you know what? I'm healthier just being with, I've got friends that I've known since I was 13, 14 years old. We've been best friends ever since. And they are still my chosen family. Yeah.
You have a question.
Okay.
Do you think things are substantially different now than when she started at the Forest Service in the past?
Well,
Could you repeat the question?
so are things better in the Forest Service now than they were when? 2000. Well, I think they've got to be. I mean, I would be depressed and suicidal if they were worse than they or not any better. So I have fire friends who I believe have evolved. So I can't speak for the other, but you know, the fire folks, come on, we're the knuckle draggers of the organization. If my fire buddies have evolved, I have to think that the rest of the people have evolved as well. If they hadn't, I don't think I'd be invited to the Forest Service leadership teams. So I'd like to think that they have. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So anyone that like your employees, coworkers, that the situation that you were in, and did anyone find out and come and apologize? Or has anyone come and, you know, give a sincere apology?
No. That's so sweet. Well, I go like this. Oh, no. But I mean, considering all of the fire people I worked with, there weren't that many who said derogatory things. I mean, and no one ever said a derogatory thing towards me. People know, for the most part, I think a lot of people knew I kind of was a hard ass. That was how I played the role, and people knew not to mess. And so there weren't too many times where there was not too much to apologize for. Yeah.
Do you feel like your leadership style changed significantly when you transitioned?
Well, I was 100% more successful after I transitioned professionally than before. I think I was relaxed. I could be myself. I wasn't trying to act a certain way. And so I think my basic management style remained the same, but I think I was just able to relax and be myself. And I think it put people at ease, maybe more so. And so it was a little bit of me and a little bit of them, I think.
Just for yourself, TV and I'm retired. Was your transition in between your wildland and your structural days?
It was. I was structure, then I went to grad school. And when I finished grad school and came back to the wildland service, I had transitioned during that time. I mean, transition for me was, you know, I feel almost guilty for, I mean, I lost my family in the process, but my wife divorced me. And once my wife divorced me, you know, all I had to do was put on some lipstick and everybody thought I was female already. That's what caused me so much trouble before I transitioned. I already looked kind of feminine. So, yeah, so I transitioned during the grad school time. Yeah. We're gonna sign books available if you want to buy books, and then we can sign the books, and I would like to do it outside because it's cool. I assume.
No, we want you to suffer.
Well, let's get Bobbie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we'll have a napkin here tomorrow, so don't mind helping us back some chairs.